Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we have a fun little Q&A. So there were a lot of questions we couldn't get to in our last episode. So we thought we would just keep it going and answer some of them. We decided to focus more on relationship questions. So dating once you're kind of in a relationship, have a boyfriend or girlfriend, or are married. So that's what it's going to be focused on. I'm excited. There's a lot of juicy ones that we're going to be talking about. So we're just going to jump straight into it. Okay, question number 1 is, how do you prioritize friendships when you enter into a relationship?
Well, you guys know I am single, so I'm not in a relationship right now. And so that's not something I have to really focus on. But I will say, out of like my last relationship experience, I was actually talking with a girlfriend this weekend, or this previous weekend. And we were talking about actually that concept of like, you know, when you enter into a relationship and it's like a known thing that your girlfriend who has a new boyfriend in her life and you like suddenly never see her, she just like ghosts you. And I asked my friend, I was like, was that me? Because I felt like I was spending so much time with the person that I was with. And she was like, no, Brie, you actually did a really good job at making sure you were maintaining your friendships while also, of course, spending, I would say, a majority of my time with my person at the time. And so truthfully, I would just say, like, I mean, it's so special when you have that person that you are so excited about, that you feel the most connected to, that you want to devote all your time to, and you are going to provide extra doses of your time to that person. But I think just reminding yourself of, like, at least for myself, like, I am so sustained by my girlfriends. And even though the presence of my person is such a unique and such a special place in my life, it will never completely replace the presence of my girlfriends or my friendships in my life, and the value that I can receive, even, you know, in times when I'm trying to discern or was trying to pray over certain things in my relationship. I think that is the moment that it's so special to have those friendships that you're really resting on, leaning on, and inviting into your life as you enter that new season of being into a relationship, because they are so there to be steadfast for you, to be a sounding board for you, to be a listening ear for you, and to support you through prayer or encouragement or whatever it may be. And so I think just never forget how much your friends love you truly. Like, that sounds so simple, but I know for myself, like, as much as I would get so filled up on time with my person, like, there's just a different kind of fill that I would receive from time with my girlfriend. So that would always just allow it to remain a priority for me.
And I think that's so important to remember too, especially when you're initially dating someone. I feel like when you put all of your emotional energy, or even are seeking all of that fulfillment just from them, it's honestly a little overwhelming. So I think when you are able to be intentional, and you almost have to set slight boundaries to make sure that you still have time to prioritize your friendships, I actually think that's so much healthier for the relationship. And it can sometimes like slow the progression of dating down a little bit, but I think it slows it down in a healthier way. So I would just say being intentional upfront. And then also, like, I love that you just asked your friend that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started dating my husband, I a little bit like fell into that, not like trap, but just because my weekends suddenly were completely dedicated to him and we didn't live super close. So I had to like dedicate a lot of time to him. And I remember a friend had just mentioned that she just wanted more quality time with me. And honestly, I was like so grateful to hear and receive that. And I feel like it allowed me to be so intentional moving forward. And I was like, okay, this is something that I've never had to figure out before, but I'm going to figure it out. And now I feel like I really am so thankful for that, because I feel like I'll ask my friends and I've never heard that since, where they're like, you've always been really intentional about that. So I think it just takes that upfront planning and checking in on your friends. But
yeah.
Okay, question number 2 is, what are the pros and cons to getting married young? I honestly think a lot of the pros and cons are kind of the same thing. Like the first thing that came to mind is just the fact that I'll be speaking from the lens of I got married at 21. So I feel like that's young, but it's not like crazy young. At that age, I remember feeling like I was such an adult and I had so much figured out. But looking back, I'm like, no, I really didn't. And so a big thing is just my husband and I had so many life changes, like so many moves, so many job changes, so many financial changes, like just so much that you're like navigating and adapting. And I think that is such a pro in the sense of I went through very like unique seasons, but I had my person to do it with. But at the same time, that can also be what's challenging because you're figuring out a lot of things together, which is amazing, but also that person kind of comes along the ride. So it's like when you lose your job, that affects them or vice versa. Or when you, like even the job that my husband got recently, and now it's in San Francisco, so he lives there part-time. And it's like, that's just kind of inevitable. So I almost feel thankful that we had a chance to navigate those things early on. But I do feel like probably the biggest challenge is you just think you're going to stay exactly the same from the point you get married. Like I remember feeling like this is just kind of who we're going to be, like personality wise and kind of identity wise. And although who we are at our ultimate core has stayed the same, I think even personality, interests, passions, so much of that has changed, like so much. And I think you almost have to learn how to adapt to your partner constantly. I'm like, oh, I used to think my husband was like so extroverted and he liked doing these like very adventurous things. And then there have been seasons where I'm like, you're such an introvert and homebody. And like, you're just kind of always adapting and changing. And I know I've done the same thing. So I think it just, especially in your early 20s, it's so transformational and there's so much that you're still exploring and learning. So I think just knowing that if you get married young, find somebody who wants to go on that adventure with you and is going to champion you amidst those changes. And you're not going to feel like, thankfully, I feel like we actually were able to encourage one another in those changes. Like we helped each other press through them. And we're like, we know this is uncertain, this is scary, and it affects both of us, but like we have each other, we're going to figure it out. And that's such a blessing. And we didn't see it as a burden because we couldn't go off and have the same freedom and decision making that maybe some of our single friends had. And so I think it really is such a perspective thing. When you get married young, it will force you to grow up really quickly. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And it's something that we've loved, having all of those changes together and reflecting back on that. But it also will be such a refining thing. So it's definitely not like the easiest thing in a lot of ways. It's not like an easy decision, if that makes sense, but so worth it. So worth it.
And I love like hearing that perspective so much because as someone who didn't get married young, it's like in such a different breath. Like I've experienced those changes you've talked about, but I've been by myself. Like it's just been me. Yeah. And in ways like that's been such a beautiful gift too, because I've been like, whoa, do I feel so different than I was when I was 21? But then in the same breath, it's like, wow, to imagine someone who like has chosen you through all those years, like that is like astounding to me. So I just love that perspective so much.
Oh, that's so sweet. Okay, third question is thoughts on dating apps.
Okay. So let me give you my journey with dating apps. I have downloaded Hinge a total of maybe twice. I
didn't know that.
I do have a profile. It exists. It exists in the world, but it probably doesn't right now because it's been on mute for like a year. I remember the first time I downloaded it, it was Valentine's Day. Wait, that's so funny. It was literally just Valentine's Day. Not this year. It was like back when I lived in Austin. And I remember I was like with a bunch of girlfriends and so many of my friends were on like dating apps and they're like, Brie, just download it and create a profile. And I think that's literally like what I did on Galentine's that year. And it was like this whole fun thing. Uploaded photos. And then I remember literally like going through the app, being on it way too much for like 2 days straight. never going on a date with it and deactivating it. And then I moved to LA, and I think right when I moved, I like randomly like reopened it. Just I was curious and I looked, and I think I would like matched with some people, never went on a date with it. I just couldn't get myself to. And I will say I'm not a huge dating app girl. That is like my experience. Like I said,
Yeah.
if I wanted to download Hinge right now and sign in, like I have a profile. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It exists.
It's ready to go.
It's ready to go. I mean, the photos are literally probably a year too old, whatever. But I think personally for myself, I genuinely feel like I'm someone who wants to meet my person in person. I'm open to them. I think dating apps, just as social media, can be a beautiful tool to meet other people. And I think there are so many beautiful success stories and even like beautiful experiences that my girlfriends go on of like meeting a guy and going on a couple dates. And even if it didn't work out, like they had a wonderful dating experience. So I think it can truly be like such a gift. But I think I do see personally like the hindrance that dating apps bring, and I think it's also the hindrance that social media brings, is that there's always another option. There's always another pretty face. There's always another guy to text. There's always another option. And like, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with this either. But like, I think it's crazy to me how some people can be like seeing so many people at once. Like it's one thing to be seeing like a couple people at once, like have your options. I'm so for that. I mean, if that works for you, it doesn't work for me as well. But I just feel like we start getting decision fatigue because we see so many different faces, so many different people, so many different careers. And it's as easy and as passive as like a swipe, a click, and a message, that I think sometimes it kind of steals the joy from, you know, the times that we're in public and like we see a handsome guy and we want to go talk to them. We're suddenly stunted and we like let the opportunity go because we think that at our fingertips, we can just access 100 more men that might look like him. And so that's my only perception on dating apps, where it's like kind of a push or pull. But I personally am not on them. I don't really have plans to be on them.
Yeah.
I feel like I love meeting people in person, and I feel fortunate that I do meet a lot of people in person. So that's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the key. If you already are meeting quality people out and about, I think there's really no need
I agree.
to be on dating apps. I think I have seen, especially for people, they just have no way of really meeting anyone. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great way to like open up the pool of, you have the chance to connect with people you wouldn't otherwise have crossed paths with.
Yes.
But I do think just being so intentional with, like, I think we sometimes almost gamify, and I've seen guys and girls do this where they almost just go on there to have fun. And I get that, like, that can be fine. But I think it's, if you're actually dating with the intention of marriage and you actually want to have quality dating experiences, being so mindful that everything else you uphold should stand in that environment as well. And you should be seeking people that also are looking for that. So I think just it can be really easy to fall into the trap of almost accepting less than dates or less than dating experiences and just almost using it to fill something.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can do it in a really healthy way and be super intentional, it can be awesome. But I do think it's something you have to kind of just proceed with caution and intentionality.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say on that, as you're speaking, it made me think of like being very weary of, I think, the addiction to it. Because I think it is like a dopamine hits that I've seen my friends. I even saw myself for the couple days that I was on, of like opening the app and suddenly you have X amount of likes and you're like, wow, all these guys like me, or they think I'm pretty, or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And the vice versa of like going and just liking a bunch of guys just like through a photo. And so be very wary of like, if you see yourself finding worth through the little dopamine hits of going on the app, or if you find yourself addicted to filtering through people, like, we shouldn't normalize the fact that we have access to that many people all at once.
Yeah.
That's where I just encourage you to proceed with caution.
Yes, that's a really good point. Next question is, how do you keep God at the center of your relationship? I feel like for me, this is just going off of my experience. When it comes to faith, that is not just like an addition to my life. That really is at the core of my identity. It's at the core of how I live my life, the types of people I'm drawn to. It really is just like so the essence of who I am. And so I feel like for me, it's not a matter of keeping God at the center of the relationship. It's like, if this is the most important thing to me, I am only going to connect so deeply with people who also have that be their ultimate sense of identity and purpose. And so I'm so grateful because that provided so much protection before marriage. And like, if faith is important to you in the way that it's important to us, if you just let that saturate your being and you're trying to find people that like can meet you where you're at, you're only going to feel like fully understood, seen, loved by other people that are also at that place. And so I don't think it's something you'll have to fight for. Like, I don't think you'll have to fight to keep God in the center of that relationship, because it just will be the core of what keeps you guys together and truly unites you.
Yeah. I feel like for myself, I'm actually just thinking about this because I just told Marissa, I was like, I don't really know how to answer that one. But now that I'm thinking about it, like, I do think about like my more intentional dating experiences or a previous experience I just kind of like left, that sounds so dramatic, that just ended, which you guys know, have a whole episode on like breakup, all that kind of stuff. I will say, now that I'm thinking about it in hindsight, God was so in the center of it, because every moment along the way, God was signaling to me what like where the peace lied. Like, God would give me peace when I knew I was like meant to move forward, or I knew I was meant to go on this date, or I knew I was meant to have this experience with him or go to XYZ with him. But then also in the same breath, and this is, you know, a different outcome than Marissa's. Marissa's is more so with the intention towards marriage. Mine was the intention actually that God was in the center of entering or exiting a relationship. I knew that God was at the center when I was following and pursuing the peace. And wherever that peace is leading you, whether that is to enter into a relationship with someone, whether that is to take a next step with someone, whether that is even a minute thing, whether it's like going to coffee that day with him or whatever it may be, like, you will know God is present with you when you feel the presence of peace. And I think about actually like when God was calling me out of that relationship, God literally stripped me of peace and he produced confusion and just feelings of anxiousness. And that for me was my signal of like, okay, God, you're still in this with me, but now you're communicating to me a different outcome. And I have to press in of like, God, you promised me a sound mind. And right now I don't have a sound mind about the relationship I'm in. And so what is it going to require, or what action do I need to take in order to return back to the peace and presence of God? And so that for me is my experience with like keeping God at the center, even though my story was like more so God in the center and God in the exit. But hopefully that maybe encourages you guys to, like, whether you're in a super serious relationship or whether you're in a marriage or whether you're considering if you're meant to be with this person, I would just say, you know that God is near when you feel the presence of peace.
Yeah, that's really good. That's helpful.
So the next question, I don't know how to answer, is how to make intentional future plans with your partner, such as engagement, marriage, and so on.
So I feel like this isn't a perfect one size fits all. I think a lot of it depends on the stage of life you're in. So specifically, like I shared, getting married young, I knew for me, a desire I had was I really wanted to finish college before I got married. I don't think you have to by any means. That just in my mind was something, it just kind of felt like the next step. And then I wanted to begin a life with the person after that. And so thankfully that provided like some kind of sense of a timeline to go off of. And so I remember I just communicated that very clearly when I was dating my husband. And I think the key is just like communication, just being as open as possible and just sharing what it is you want. We both right away from the like first date, we shared that we were dating with the intention of marriage, and like we took dating very seriously and we aligned on all of that. So naturally, I remember he said like, I really don't want to like date someone for super long. Like my parents got married young. Like I've always seen myself doing that. And I remember that did feel like even a little bit intimidating to me. But honestly, I just appreciated that he was so open about that and he never put any pressure on it. But it allowed us to just always be checking in and seeing like, hey, we're dating with intention. It's not something that's just happening to us. Like, are we still aligned? Like, where are we feeling? Where are we at in our lives? What are our goals? How can we be thinking of the future we want to create together? The one thing I will say though, with that, I think it's beautiful to dream with your person and share and try to get alignment. I think that's such a key part in the whole purpose of dating. But I will say there were certain boundaries that I think it's important to protect, especially when you're not engaged or married to somebody.
Yeah.
You don't know for certain that they're going to be your person. And so I remember even just language of like saying our kids or our future, just assuming these things until we got engaged. I just didn't really want to say like our kids or are this. Like I didn't want to assume with such authority because I knew for the sake of both of us, like if something happened, I wanted to feel protected and I didn't want to have to grieve. Like obviously there'd be grieving, but I didn't want to have to grieve this life that I created with this person that was never meant to be my spouse. And so I think being mindful of what are your boundaries of like, how can we protect the stage of dating that we're in, but also how can I invite them into the conversation? And I think just being very open of, you know, if you want to like get married, if where you're at with that, where they're at, I think you can still maintain like the surprise and the magic and the excitement of engagement while still being like, here's what our sights are set on. Here's how we're actively preparing and being super intentional that we're preparing for a future together. I think you can still do that. And like, I was still genuinely surprised when we got engaged, but I think communication is just the biggest thing, especially from the beginning. We always just would over communicate. So we were never surprised where the other person was at emotionally. And that helped a lot.
That's such a good answer. And I feel like your answer really inspired me too, even in my singleness of like, though I'm not making plans with someone, I think it's so important as well. Like just to what you said, like protecting your language around someone, whether it's like someone you're going on dates with or whether it's someone you are in a relationship with, of like, don't allow your heart or your words or your verbiage to jump ahead to where you're not yet. And that's not to say that you do need to communicate those things and you do need to be excited and you do need to, you know, dream with your person and also allow yourself permission to be excited, but be very wary of like placing a label or what, like you said, placing authority into a future prospect of a life that does not yet exist. And even like I said, in singleness, I feel like I see that just as frequently of like, whether it's been myself or whether it's been friends, we'll go on a date with one guy and then suddenly we're like, you know, dreaming about our whole lives together. It's like, let's just be very cautious of the language we attach to our future, because though there can be a level of certainty, until that has arrived, you also don't really know and you don't want to dance with that future heartbreak. So yeah, it's hard. That's really hard.
It is hard. Yeah. How many dates does it take to know if there's real potential?
Gosh, I feel like it really, really varies, honestly. Like,
so much.
So much. Like I can think of dates I've gone on, first date, and I'm like, wow, this person has potential, and that just like really saw itself through. But then I can think of even like a more recent dating experience where it was like the first date, I was like, wow, like over the moon. Second date, I was like, okay, you're awesome, but I don't know if you're for me. And I mean, that's the purpose. Like you go on dates and it takes time. But gosh, I feel like it really just varies from person to person, from yourself to the other person that you're with and the time it takes to get to know them. I don't even know if there's like one, like there's not really one answer of like how many dates, you know?
Yeah, I really don't think there's a perfect number. And also too, I think it really depends. Like before I even went on a date with my husband, we had 2 like almost full days together of just hanging out. So we already knew each other we knew each other pretty well for somebody that was going on a first date. So the first date I did, like I knew there was potential before I even went on the date. And so I think it is hard, but I think to try to be like helpful to if anybody's navigating that, when do you feel like, is there a certain amount of time where you're like, okay, if you still don't see the potential, how do you know when to just like put it to rest?
Yeah. That's also so dependent on every person. But for myself, like I personally am just not, I'm not in the business of like playing games or like trying to force something. I know there's always the argument, if you will, of like, oh, well, it could just take time for someone to warm up to you. It could just take time to get to know them in that way, which is so true. But I think with my personality, yes, it's going to take time to get to know me, but I think I know naturally like what I'm looking for is not going to take that much time for me to really like kind of unlock something with. And so for me, honestly, some people are going to disagree with this, but like 3 dates in, that's like, I pretty much cap it at that a lot of times. After 3 dates, if I'm not feeling it, I personally don't really feel the need to like wait for this person to warm up to me more or me to warm up to them more. Like I kind of know how I feel. 4 dates is like, whoa, Brie, you really gave it a shot.
That is a long time. Yeah.
But some people disagree. Some people will like see the same person for 3 months and for them that works. For me, that doesn't. Like I don't need that extensive amount of time. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think knowing yourself too, and I am somebody who takes time to warm up. But with that said, I also am such a proponent of you want to make sure that the dates are actually productive. So it's like you don't want to keep repeating the same date over and over again.
Good.
So it's like if you're not getting those hard hitting questions, if you don't feel like they're being like who they are is actually being revealed to you, then I think maybe you need to try something different. Like you need to feel like you're making progress in order for it to be worth your time. Or you might just be kind of prolonging the inevitable, where I think a lot of times people are like, I'm just going to see if things change. But then there are a few things and I'm like, those are basically deal breakers for you. Like, I think you're just not wanting to end it because they're a good person.
Yeah.
And so I think out of respect for everyone's time, like dating should ultimately be like productive and you should be growing and getting clarity and insight. So I think you just have to be intentional and that'll be made known. Like I'm all for giving somebody like first, second date, let them warm up, let them like actually give them a chance for you to get to know them. But I feel like you should definitely be making some progress.
Yeah, that's such a good perspective. I love that.
What is the biggest adjustment that you found entering into a relationship/marriage?
Well, in my first marriage, no, I'm just kidding. I always joke about that. I have not been married. Don't worry, you guys. But I would say for me, though, I haven't really been in like a serious, long relationship. I think from my, like, I'm pulling a lot from my recent experience. I think first and foremost for me, as someone who has been single for so long and has been very independent for so long and all my time was dedicated to myself, I think for me, something that took me aback, and not in a bad way, but just in a transitional kind of way, was truly just the time that it kind of takes from you. The time, the capacity, the energy, the thought that is no longer just directed towards you. And I think for me, there was like this beautiful adjustment that I had to go through that I almost at first felt like, whoa, why does nobody talk about this? Like,
yeah,
it is such an adjustment to have all your capacity, your time, your schedule dedicated and focused on yourself, but then to suddenly feel like you adore someone or love someone so much that you're suddenly wanting to shift all of that intention to self and give it to someone else. I think that was like the biggest thing for me, of how much I was thinking about this other person, how much of my time I would almost like never spend time alone because I just wanted to give every ounce of my time to that other person. And I feel like that was definitely like an adjustment and something I had to like learn and like almost recalibrate my boundaries of, okay, I need to remember that, you know, now I need to not only take care of this person, but I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself too. So I think it's just, yeah, your capacity is so different. And I really like understand the perspective of like, now it says it biblically of like, when you are single, your attention is all on you and it's all on God. But then suddenly when you have like a spouse or you have a partner or you have boyfriend, whatever it is, it's like your attention is suddenly divided. So I even found for myself, like, even in my relationship with God, because it wasn't just me and God anymore, it was like me, God, and then also me trying to love this person over here. Oh my gosh, I had to just almost rise into a newfound intentionality in every area of my life, towards my relationship with God, towards my relationship with myself. But also I found like God was almost like strengthening me and like expanding a capacity to love in a way that I didn't even know was possible. It's honestly a really beautiful experience, and it makes me excited for myself to like really experience that with hopefully like the man that I know I want to marry, because I can only imagine, yeah, just that whole experience within itself. But it's a really big transition, and I don't feel like I ever hear people talk about that.
I agree. I remember exactly that. I was just like, whoa. And especially being somebody who has a limited social battery, it was crazy to see that like expand, like almost my like, I almost had this newfound like energy that I could put towards my husband. And that was neat to see. But I think specific to kind of like a funny example of something that was surprising with marriage is, so for context, when I was in college, I never had like an actual roommate in my room. I had like roommates, like people I lived with, but it was always in separate rooms. And so actually the biggest surprise for marriage, and I don't know if everyone feels this way, I feel like I just didn't talk to married people about this, but it was actually living with my now husband. Like I remember when we like intermixed our lives in that way once we got married, I was like, oh my gosh, I like don't know how to live with a boy. Like that
I feel like I would have no idea.
Honestly, it was such an adjustment, and the apartment we moved to was like more location focused. So it was so tiny. It was such a tiny 1-bedroom. And I just remember we both had like so much furniture that easily could have filled up that space like on our own. And so we brought it all in, and I just was like, okay, so there's one closet, we have 2 couches. Like it was just one of those funny things where I felt like it was such a beautiful but also chaotic depiction of kind of what happens in marriage, where it's like, here I had all these like boho, like rose gold kind of like girly furniture, and he had very like eclectic mid-century modern, and we put it in this space and it like doesn't work, but somehow we have to figure out how to make it work, and you're getting rid of stuff and you're refiguring things out in new like rhythms and routines. And it honestly just is a little bit like chaotic. You can't ignore the fact that it like, you're trying to bring these 2 very different things and 2 very different people together in unity. And it is hard, but it also is so beautiful because like, I think the home was just such an example of, oh, this is what it's like to build something with somebody. Like, it's not just what do I want this place to look like? It's like, what does our style look like together as a unit? And like, in what areas do we compromise or let the other person have like, for us, we both, I feel like aesthetics matter to us. So that's why I'm giving this example of like, where do you get creative freedom and expression and where do I? And like, it just was that first moment of like, oh, it's not just me anymore making decisions for myself. Like, it truly is about not only just learning how to live with somebody, because we've learned how to do that with roommates, but learning how to combine lives in a way that you don't want to lose like your sense of self and identity. You want it to intermix in a beautiful way together that becomes enhanced rather than feeling like I'm having to give up all these things. So that's just like a story that sticks out in my mind. That was like funny, but also exciting, but also kind of chaotic. And I think it's a really like special depiction.
Yeah, I love that. As someone who lives alone, I like actually think about that sometimes. I'm like, I cannot imagine if a man was beside me in bed right now, or like I had to share a bathroom with him or a closet.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, no.
The closet is humbling.
I feel like I'm going to need my own bathroom. I'm going to need my own closet. Gosh.
And that's another downside to getting married young. Now we have like more space, and I'm so grateful for that. But at the time it was like, your space is my space. Like, and it just
literal roommate vibes.
Yeah. Like it is so interesting. And you're like, okay, this is an adjustment for sure.
So our last and final question in this love, more relationship focused Q&A is, how do you know when you're in love with someone?
This question is, again, one of those really hard ones, because I don't want to be the person that's like, when you know, you know. Because to some degree that is true. But honestly, I want to give like more specific insight. And so, of course, before this was like, I'm going to ask my husband and hope that he has an amazing answer, and I'm going to say that. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him. And again, this just is like boy brain. I feel like where guys can sometimes oversimplify things, and I love that, but I also can be like a little frustrating at times. And he's like, oh, you don't necessarily know, like you just choose to love the person. And I was like, that's like not super helpful, but also I think that's so beautiful. But he was like, I mean, there are like just feelings. I was like, well, could you just stop loving me? Like, hypothetically speaking, is it possible once you're in love with somebody to just like stop? And he's like, I mean, no. So like, it is hard too, where I think when you do love somebody, it's something that's so strong that it's like, sometimes you can't break it off if you try. There's just like this powerful force that does unite one another. So the way in which I'm going to try to like explain it a little bit, if you're somebody who, again, I want this to be helpful from like a dating, relationship, marriage context. I think one thing I think about now, my definition of love has evolved so much, because I think when I was dating, I used to measure love in the way I felt. But now in marriage, I think it's almost in the way of like what I would sacrifice or what I would do for the other person. And it reminded me of John 15:13, which says, greater love has no one than this, that somebody would lay down his life for his friends. And I think that's like the ultimate measure of love is unconditional. True love in its purest form is unconditional, and there's no sacrifice it wouldn't give for the other person. And I know that might seem extreme, but I just think about like one day when I'm a mom and I like hold my baby for the first time, I'm like, I know in a heartbeat, there is nothing I wouldn't do. There's no condition that's withheld with this human. Like the love is so endless, and there's like no sacrifice I wouldn't make. And I think that's kind of what marriage and what love feels like, is not in a way of like, oh, I feel like I have to make a sacrifice, but I'm like, I would choose to do anything for this person because their happiness is kind of my own. And it's like, I would choose this person every single day for the rest of my life. And I think that's like ultimately what love is. And I know that sounds like maybe a little bit like intense and overwhelming, but I just want to encourage you to challenge your belief of what love is, that when you truly say you love somebody, like understand the authority and weight that can hold in it, because I think love just is so powerful. Love is a beautiful gift that we get to extend. And so if you're thinking about do I really love this person? Like, does your love have conditions, and does it have limits to what you would sacrifice? And I hope, like, I pray that that actually might be helpful and even open your mind to what love can even look like.
I mean, even for me, like, receiving that's like so beautiful. And I don't even know if I've ever thought about it that way, because I don't think I've ever been like in love with someone, like truly, truly. I mean, I'm not married. Not that you have to be married to be in love, but I feel like even receiving that is like so beautiful for me. So I'm confident it'll be beautiful for someone listening. And truthfully, like, as someone who is single, when I hear people say, like, when you know, I personally love that. Like, I want to know. Like, I just want to feel that. And the fact that I haven't felt that if you know moment, I'm like, okay, it just hasn't happened yet. Like, I'm going to know. And so I love hearing that.
Okay, so for Love Notes, wanted to do something kind of silly, kind of lighthearted. It's kind of random, but I thought it would be fun to do a pop quiz. So Bree didn't know what we were going to do, and I just put together a little Gen Z slang quiz. I learned a lot in this process. I'm actually really curious. I feel like you're good at like staying on top of like social media trends and stuff.
We'll see.
But you're not technically
I
Gen
think
Z.
I'm a millennial.
I think you're right at the cutoff.
Are you Gen Z?
Technically, I'm like the last year.
I don't know what years they are. I'm a millennial, though. I'm pretty sure.
1996?
96.
Okay. I think it ends at 97. So
too old.
I'm going to say the word. You tell me if you know what it means. Like, describe what it means.
Okay.
The first word is stan.
Stan. Like, I stand with that. Like, I agree. Right?
I think so. They said it's a combination of the word stalker and fan. So if you stan someone...
What? No.
It means you're obsessed with them.
Okay, yeah, obsessed.
But I think it's like... I thought it meant, like I would stan that. But I think it's directed towards a person. From how I understand.
Or friend or fan? What? I thought that was like...
crazy.
I thought when people were like, I stan, it's like, yeah, like I agree, like obsessed. But like stalker? Okay. No.
I think obsessed works.
Obsessed, yeah.
Okay, if somebody has a W, what does that mean?
A win, baby.
I feel like I'm going to confuse you with how I explain these. Because I'm
win,
like,
right?
it is, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But
that
I'm
was
like,
a W, yeah. But
I'm like, did I use that correctly?
Are you sure you're not a millennial?
I definitely identify more as a millennial.
That's so funny.
Okay, if somebody's salty.
They're like bitter. They're like annoyed about something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this one
why do I kind of love this?
Never heard. Finna. Finna.
Isn't it like you're about to do something? Like I'm trying to use it in a sentence. Like,
yeah,
I'm like gonna lose my mind or something like that. Right?
I've never heard somebody say that, but yeah, it says I'm going to.
Yeah.
That does not make sense to me, but we love it.
Maybe I know this stuff because my sister is Gen Z, like, but she's
sense.
like the heart of Gen Z. Like, she is like a Gen Zer, so I hear a lot of that stuff.
What does cap mean?
No cap, like there's like no limit, right? Or at least I hear it when people are like no cap. Or what does that mean?
You're using it correctly. But it technically means cap means to lie. So if you say no cap, it means like you're being fully truthful.
Like no lie, no cap.
Would anybody ever say cap? Like if I said something and you're like cap? Or is that wrong?
I feel like that's wrong. But it's so funny because I've definitely used that. I actually used that in a text this week. I did no cap and I did the cap emoji. And I know I used it in the right context, but it's so funny because like now when I'm hearing it, I'm like, wait, what does that mean?
Okay, what is a simp or simp?
Oh, when you're like weak for someone, like you're weak for this thing, like you're obsessed with this thing, and like, yeah.
Okay, you're nailing it.
I'm obsessed with this.
Okay, if I'm going to sip tea, what does that mean?
Sip tea, like gossip.
I didn't realize that was different than spilling the tea.
Oh, wait, you're gonna sip the tea? You're gonna like, hold on, I wanna figure this out. So like spilling the tea, that's the gossip. You're gonna sip the tea, you're gonna create, I don't know.
They said it means you're going to sit back and listen rather than partaking it.
Oh, I kind of love that. Okay.
So you're just going to sip the tea.
I'm gonna sip the tea.
But not spill it.
Okay. Oh, I love that. Okay, got it. Noted.
What does bussin' mean?
Okay. I heard this the other day and I was like, this is a new one. Bussin', you lost me. I don't know. I have no clue.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you learned what it meant.
No, I think I was told, but I was like, that's not coming out of my mouth.
I thought it meant like, oh, that's fine, or like, that's sick. But they say delicious. But I'm like, can you
oh, that's
ever say
bussin'. Like we're about to go get Air One.
Like that's bussin'.
That's bussin'.
But do people say that? I feel like they'd be like, that outfit is bussin'. I'm not sure if that's correct. If you're Gen Z, let us know.
Yeah, let us know. I don't think I'll use that one.
I'm not sure if I'm saying this one correctly. SMOL. Small.
Like you're a small like girl. Like that's really tiny. Right?
It's so funny when you explain it, but yeah, it's like when something's really adorable and small.
Yeah, like
it's
cute.
Small.
Yeah,
I picture like a tiny purse. I don't know why. I'm like, it's small.
Like a little, like a Polly Pocket.
Okay, last one. I think you're gonna get this. If something's living rent free, what does that mean?
It's like just like on your mind all the time. Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you were so cheesy.
I actually am obsessed that I knew a lot of those. I didn't think I would.
You are an honorary Gen Z.
I am.
Oh, well, we hope you guys found this episode, as always, valuable and had fun playing this little quiz with us. And we will see you in our next one. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
And Marissa.